Crowdfunding, final judgments. What do you need to know? Campaigns dying. I mean, campaigns at the end. Let's talk. Elden Ring. Elden Ring. I have a whole video dedicated to this. I'm not sure when you're going to be seeing it, if it's before or after this one, but my key take-home point is, do you know how many board games based on video games, not like adjacent or, in the same line of, or, emulating, but video games that have direct ties to their board games? How many of them are in the Board Game Geek Top 500? Do you know that? There's like 2, maybe 3, depending on how far you want to stretch those guidelines that I just said, right? One of them is the War of Mine. One of them is a Civ building game. Those are kind of the only 2. Even Bloodborne, which is thought to be one of the better ones. Did you know where that is before looking this up? Or before me telling you right now? Bloodborne is in the 700s. Right? This War of Mine is like 162, and the Civ game is somewhere in the 200s. So now I'm not including mechs versus minions because that's adjacent. That's not direct. There's no mechs versus minions video game. There's League of Legends or something else. That's where I'm going with this, right? So when you're looking at this one, for example, or if you're looking at Heroes of Might and Magic, that I'm sure will have a late pledge from Archon Studios, right, that just ended. Do you want the IP? Do you want a really exquisite game? Because there has not been a huge overlap in this. Now, I'm not saying anything on this. Also, with my other video that I put out from this standpoint is this going to be 20 or 25% of Elden Ring? And for the price point of a PS5 and the whole Elden Ring, the video game, you can get that instead right now. Right now. Right now. Not 2 years from now. Those are the biggest take-home points. That is the should you get it or not. And frankly speaking, this is, I dare say right now, this is underperforming. $3 million for the biggest video game that came out in the last year. I'm gonna, give Ragnarok, and Kratos, I'm gonna give his aside, from that aspect of things. Those were sort of the 2 top video games allegedly of this year, and those are ones going for the top awards. But this is arguably one of the biggest in the last couple of years, and especially at the price point, this is only 10,000 backers. Only 10,000 backers. That's not, what I was expecting by the end of this campaign. If you said over or under 500 million, if you said over or under 500 million, $5 million at the beginning of this campaign, which do I think I would have been on the other side of? I would have said the over. I would have taken the over without hesitation. Primal The Awakening, based on no IP whatsoever, out of nowhere by a company that hadn't done this before, raised $2 million with 11,000 backers. So that's comparison's sake, right? Right? Arguably, the player base for this, even the crossover for this, should be bigger than Resident Evil's. It should be bigger than, maybe not Dark Souls, but it's, risen up faster than Dark Souls now with the age of social media. The other thing, which we're tuning in at the very end to find out about, right? Because they're slowly doing unlocks and slowly allowing people to sort of choose back and forth, right? What are you getting extra? Skeletons, Mad Pumpkin Head, Warrior, Tiles, additional quests, additional enemy. That's all the stuff I just showed you. But that's not terribly impressive. I mean, this is not anything like I was expecting. This is less than I was expecting. Now, tiles are really cool. I like that. Quests are good from that aspect of things, but with all of the other enemies that you're getting, if you're getting the all-in, if you're not getting the base pledge, which doesn't even include the stretch goals, which it makes no sense to me why you'd even offer that as a pledge option. If you're not getting that, then this isn't adding percentage-wise nearly as much as they were sort of hyping it, in my opinion, prior to the campaign of this is going to be over $100 worth of value. So I'm not seeing it at this point unless they have something hidden down in the mist here in the last 48 hours by the time you're viewing this that I haven't updated yet. This is a lot. And to have 2 of these additionally as Kickstarter exclusive. Now, don't get me wrong. This is going to be a good value. Steam Forge at retail through their web shop, they don't go wide retail with most of their games. At their web shop, this is going to cost you a lot more, even if they sell the Kickstarter exclusive stuff, right? Kickstarter exclusive, take that for what you will. So it's going to cost you more. This expansion is going to be $70 or $80. Like, I have no qualms about telling you that. So if you are concerned and you need to get it all and you need to get it at a better price, this is going to be the better price. Could you potentially get someone's pledge at cost at some point? Yeah, if you're very careful, you're very patient, and you time things absolutely right, sure. But that's not going to be necessarily easy either. So that's where the risk comes in. But these are big money expansions right here. $90 and $120 worth of expansions. And I have to wonder how much of that is miniature based. I look at this and I look at, say, for example, Oathsworn, which I have the standee version of. How much less overhead, how much less space, how much less shipping cost, and how much less money would it be if you did a standee version? Well, a standee version doesn't get you the cash necessarily either, though. That's the problem with it at the same time. So, to make your decision any easier, by the time you're viewing this, you have a couple hours left because this finishes on Friday at 3 p.m., but I'm sure there'll be late pledging as well, just like Heroes of Might and Magic, and that was basically my take home with Heroes of Might and Magic 2. Recent nostalgia, don't get played on it. You like the gameplay, then you get it. You love the gameplay, then you get it. There you go. The Last of Us. The Last of Us. I mean, it's got $900,000. This is freaking amazing. This is an overperformer. This has 8,300 backers. I'm not a huge fan of some of the mechanics that this is presented with, but again, as a video game sort of ish adjacent board game, it's doing really well. And the people who like these Escape the Dark systems really like them. I've never played one. I'd be open to playing one, but it's not one that I'm necessarily going to pick up, just by the nature of how you're exploring, how you're open world eventing, and how sometimes the random nature of what's happening is a little bit out of your control. Like, I'm getting away from that a little bit. That just doesn't always suit me as well. And I'm being a little bit pickier with these triple digit price points. You know, I can buy 2 of the upcoming games that I'm going to talk about here in a second for less than the price of this one. And that's also what I'm looking at. It'll take up less space, it'll take up less overhead, I get to save it to the easier. And that's the issue with something like this. That's my big problem with it. Not that there is a problem with it. I think they put out a very quality game. I have no qualms about what they're putting out here. There's a relatively good track record with Themeborn. So, final judgment, I mean, if this is your ilk and you really like this one, I'd say go for it. Because I guarantee you probably don't have a ton of stuff like this with the exact nature of what Escape from the Dark does in terms of their games versus other ones. So there you go. Werewolf, the Apocalypse Retaliation. By the time you guys get watching this one, this is going to be well over for about 12, maybe 20 hours. I'm not convinced at all. I'm not convinced at all. I think there's too much RPG narrative in a box for me to feel like I'm not getting that primarily with a board game tacked onto it, as opposed to vice versa. And they haven't delivered on their previous Vampire Chapters one. And so there's too much left up in the air. I think there's too many moving parts with the mechanics. I mean, I think they're doing some cool stuff with the triple, forms that you can do with the werewolf between the full werewolf, the wolf, or the human form. I think that's a cool mechanic that I'd like to see elsewhere. But again, I think you're paying a lot for miniatures here. I'm not sure I'm necessarily getting the board game one that I want. I think I'm getting tabletop/RPG. And I want more board game. I want more board game out of this. I want more dungeon crawl-esque rather than scenario narrative based right now. I've got enough of the other. And so that's where I feel on this. That's how I feel about it. And so for me, it's an easy pass from that standpoint. But again, to raise $600,000, no small feat whatsoever. So from their standpoint, I'd say it has to be a success. Yep, fit to print. You can see right there, I'm backing it. $29. Real-time tile laying, competitive, but also potentially cooperative. I love this aspect of things. Flat Out Games is flat out killing it. All 4 of their lined games in terms of what they've put out have been similar. They've been different enough. And this one is more different than any of the other 3. This is more different than necessarily how the other 3 are similar. And so from that aspect of things, with the $6 shipping or whatever it is, no qualms about saying I'm getting this. No qualms about saying I'm not canceling this pledge. And I'm going to be keeping this one regardless. I'm a big fan of Cascadia. This gives me similar vibes of that weight, but also of that potential nice decision making that goes along with it. And a lot of people aren't going to like the real-time element, but they give you a mode to get rid of it. But I want to play it with real-time. I love real-time elements of things. Speaking of that, bullet. I gotta mention bullet every time we talk about real-time games, and there's enough out there that you should know exactly how it plays, because Flat Out does a flat out good job of it. I'm done saying flat out during the Flat Out Games campaigns, flat out. So that's all you need to know. Success, fit to print. There you go. Maple Valley. Speaking of the 2 games that I can get for less, right? Maple Valley and fit to print. So I'm not backing this one yet. But I have a strong feeling that, just like with KTBG's previous game of Power Plants, that I will probably end up backing this one by the time the campaign ends. just because this is sort of a lighter weight, family-esque, easy to get to the table type of game that fits in my playstyle of under 60 minutes. Like, you can't have enough of those games. I can make that argument until my face is blue and I'm out of breath. You can't have enough of those games. You can have more than enough of these types of games and these types of games. And, I'm looking for a big dungeon crawl or a big narrative game, and I don't have any easily accessible true bangs down there. But you can have more, way more than enough of those. Things that play under an hour or so, you can't. And so KTBG here has done an additional amount of stuff that you're going to be getting. The deluxeifications are not totally superfluous, so I like it. They're hitting a bunch of stretch goals here. Let's actually go down here and check what they've got in terms of stretch goals. Now they put them, I like how they put them in here. It's a little bit different color right there, a different oversized post, festivity card, 9 from the stretch goals here, 10 from the stretch goals there, fancy wooden resources, which again, I'm not a huge fan of in general, but if I'm going to pay a slightly increased price for a little bit of gameplay content too, I'm not against it either. So let's see what we got here. So the one thing that'll probably push me over the edge, if we scroll down all the way through this stuff that I just mentioned that was included in the graphic above, is you finally get, they're at 235 right now. This is 243 in terms of US dollars. So they're easily hit that in the last 7 days. You're getting a mini expansion here, a mini expansion adding more content, and then more table favor games, more card stuff here. So there's going to be additional ones. And so it's probably going to push me over the edge because, again, if you go to the price point here, you look at the price point, the Kickstarter edition is only $53. That's not expensive in terms of deluxeified, in terms of deluxeified, in terms of deluxeified. So I have no qualms in telling you that the value, I'm not a big value person, the value is going to be there, especially if this is anything halfway as good or near as good as Creature Comforts. People are still trying to pick that up on the secondary market. They're still trying to get some of the deluxeifications right here that they're selling separately. You can even get the Kickstarter edition for Creature Comforts as well, or the stuff that you maybe missed out if you picked up at the retail. So I'd say overall, I'd say success. I mean, you raise $250,000. I don't care how weighty or not the game is, with especially this aesthetic, which is really just nice. I like this. It's cute. I'd like to see it on the table. Now, get me my Power Plants copy. That would be a little nice too, but that's Maple Valley. It's a winner for me as well. We'll do a couple others here that also have already finished, that have just recently finished, that I didn't have a chance to comment on at the end of the campaign. We're going to talk about Slay the Spire. I mean, go back to what I said about Elden Ring. Now, this is going to be slightly different because I don't think you can necessarily screw up this game. I don't think this game is going to be that different than its counterpart on the video game side of things. That's why it probably has one of the highest potentials of the video game board games we've seen probably in the last 2 years. So that's why I think it's going to surpass a lot of those others that I mentioned that are outside of the Board Game Geek Top 500. However, is it too close? Is it too much minutia? Is it too much of that? That's going to be the divider, because I can go play the Spire in 20 minutes, and this is going to take me 2 hours. That's the big issue, because it's a little bit too close in terms of not being adapted differently enough. And it's going to be cooperative. How well is the cooperative going to be received? I've seen a lot of people really liking it, but once you get outside of the people who are familiar with the video game and have, again, the nostalgia factor of the video game, how is it going to fare then? That's going to be the interesting dichotomy. I can't necessarily comment too much on whether or not I think this is a good value. It's $100. It's $100 for what it is. I don't think you need a deluxeification, so $100 is not unreasonable at this point, but it's a lot of cards for $100. That's sort of where the issue is, but I think some of that is you're paying for the IP there. And are you willing to pay extra for IPs? I think that's very true with Elden Ring as well. I think that's also very true with one of the other ones we're going to talk about here in a minute with Heroes of Might and Magic. But, if you're okay with that from the nostalgia factor, there you go. Again, I think this is going to be a solid game. I'm less concerned about this probably than any other video game based board game in the last 2 or 3 years that I have covered, looked at, or even glanced at, whiffed a smell of on crowdfunding. So take that for what you will. Now, did I end up pledging for it? No, I didn't, because again, I don't think I'm going to be able to get this played very well. That's my bigger issue. Will I potentially consider late pledging or trading for it? Yeah, I very well might. I can't tell you that I won't at this point, that I won't have some of that down the line. So that's probably the biggest what if maybe one for me in the last month or two from that side of things. Next up, let's just go over to Heroes of Might and Magic. I wasn't going to do it in this order, but we'll do it anyway. $3.8 million, 27,000 backers. Is that good? All these stretch goals hit. Archon's never been shy about the stretch goals. That's never been the issue. But you'll notice that there's a lot of gray on these stretch goal pictures, right? There's a lot of yellow. That's a lot of plastic. That's a lot of overhead. That's a lot of cost. That's a lot of space. And this game, more so than anything else, has more nostalgia than I was ever expecting people to have. When you go down to the why it's awesome, as they self-titled it, I really wasn't as impressed with the rulebook in terms of the mechanics when I was looking through this one as I was kind of hoping to be. Like, give me something dynamic, give me something that's new, give me something that plays off of that. I really wasn't impressed with the interactions between the players, and this 1 to 3 player count is kind of different because it's really 2 to 3 player, because I think you almost have to have one of the other expansions or something for the solo, if I remember. I'm probably making that up, but it's very similar to Elden Ring in the sense that you've got exploration, you've got character building, and you've got managing that's going to go along with it, as well as individually building your heroes. The other thing I was not a fan of on this one, that I was actually a little bit more of a fan of Elden Rings, even though we haven't seen great examples of how they're going to do combat in Elden Rings, especially with the boss style of stuff, is this separate board for combat. I'm really not a fan of that in this game, because I feel like that could really slog things down. Not so much when you're playing against like the mystery opponent, if you're playing like a 3-player game of like the AI, but when you're playing against player on player, the AI game is 3 rounds. This is just potentially ad nauseum, so you could have a lot of downtime potentially there as well. So or if you do play with 3 players, you could have a lot of downtime. That was my big concern. I wasn't overly impressed with that, and the price point is, again, it's significant. It's, you know, going to cost you over $200 for everything from that whole campaign. So for me, it was an easy pass again. We'll see what time tells us over the next couple of years. How do these IP-based games stand up? Are they going to buck the trend that I talked about earlier, or are they going to continue on that trend? Next up, Unconscious Mind. This is a really good Euro game. Now, going back to my review, it has some things that I wonder that it's just a little bit too much of. I wasn't a huge fan of 2 of the elements of the research, for example. But the other mechanics really work. They really flow well. I was really impressed by this as a non-Euro gamer. I was. This is not usually my ilk. And I have to feel like that. I'm not sure it's going to be Game of the Year when it comes out, but are people that like this style of game going to like it? Yes, they are. So that's where it's really intriguing. I like this dial. I was not expecting to like the manipulation on it. I really like this. I really like the worker placement side of things. I love the recall actions that get you stuff that you go. And I loved the asymmetric powers on these clients that you're healing, essentially. Not only to be able to lift off part of it and completely heal them a portion at a time, but also the powers that they granted you at the end, which leads to your drafting in terms of how you're utilizing the dreams of healing them in that way. And so that really works. It really flows well. And I was really impressed by that. Value wise, again, we'll talk about value in this video as well, I guess a bunch, because that's what I do now. And the value was good. If you're going to get value, value's going to be better here. Fantasia Games showed us that with their previous game of Endless Winter. So I don't worry about it at all from that. There were some stretch goals. There are some deluxifications. You're going to get a ton of stuff. I don't know anything about the Nightmare expansion, so take that for what you will. But, you know, do you want it? Great. You can get it for a relatively reasonable price with just the Super Ego Pledge here. Or if you want all of the other stuff with the deluxifications, I like how they split that out. You can save yourself about 35 bucks. So I have to think that this is a huge win as well for them, because a Euro game raising over $1 million on crowdfunding does not happen on a regular basis. Yeah, there's a couple a year, but especially for Fantasia Games, which how many other projects have they done? Not too many on crowdfunding here. 2, just the other one. That's a win. So that pedigree is looking good. Speaking of good pedigrees, we're going to go over to North Star Oceans, $360,000. This expansion wasn't as much as I thought. I thought this expansion was going to be like a bunch of cards, you know, like significant, like full-blown expansion, and it just wasn't as big from that. And they offered a lot of the previous deluxifications, and the expansion itself, I mean, was only $21, so the money was fine. I have no qualms about that. But it didn't probably change my opinion on the game. I think this is a good game. I would be very happy to play it if someone brought it out, but it's not one I feel like I need to own. And these asymmetric legends that you're able to draft and play and spend the cost of in terms of victory points to play them, it didn't change my mind from that side of things, because I just am not a huge fan of the first half of the game. I love the deep deck. Love it. The deep cards that you're getting as well to go along with that, awesome. but the first half of the game leaves me a little bit, I wish it was shorter. And the game then would be much shorter. And it was one of those, I've heard this mentioned design philosophy wise, like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 years ago. And it just always stuck with me. If people are doing relatively the same thing, the first couple turns, have them skip past those first couple turns and just get into the meat of the actual decision making and the divergence. And that's what I felt like in this game, more so than a lot of other games I've played necessarily like it. But it's a very good game. I have no qualms about saying that. It's just not a game that I feel like I need to have in my collection. So this didn't change that. But again, it would be, someone pulls this out at game night. Someone says, hey, Chris, I got this new game and I'd love to play Oceans with you, without expansion. Yeah, I absolutely. No qualms from that side of things. But for North Star to knock it out of the park here with a reprint of the original, offering some of the stuff from previous, as well as a $21 price point expansion to get $360,000, I have to say yes, that's a win on that one as well. Now, the next one up, again, came out of nowhere. I don't know why Luda Creations didn't hype this one or talk about this one, because I would argue that on the Underground, the base game, when it was reprinted a couple years ago, is one of the most underrated games I have in my collection. It's probably, I want to say, a top 25 game for me, potentially. I haven't ranked my game, so I make this stuff up as I go. But I love this game. This mechanic is basically a gamer's game of Ticket to Ride. Just takes it to the next level, gives you some control, gives you a little bit of randomness, makes you super tactical. And you know me on this channel, I spittingly love tactical. I am a tactical fiend. I'm not a good strategist, but boy howdy, can I tactics the heck out of people, right? Like, that's why I love Final Fantasy Tactics. Anyway, but this just was launched without any hype or notification or anything, right? And it flew under the radar. I don't even know how many of you guys, if you wouldn't have watched my video that I did on the crowdfunding roundup, that this was going on. I mean, $1,100 backers is still great, but $77,000 for an amazing, amazing game? Should be getting more. 2 new expansions, 2 new boards, standalone expansion. You don't even need the original. And I guess maybe that's part of the problem, right? Is the blessing curse of not needing the original. Do you need both? That was my big question that I couldn't answer, which is why I didn't back it at this point. Which is why I could see myself late backing it, but I'm not convinced necessarily that it's not adding too much with the new stuff either. And the deluxeifications do me no necessarily good. It's just little meeples and little standees on the board. I don't really necessarily need that. This is a game that I didn't feel like those added significant value to. I mean, I have the deluxe version, so, I know firsthand. Now, with the 2 new maps, they say here, you're getting secret destinations, and you can block a little bit more experienced players on Paris, and then New York is going to have bridges and tunnels. I have no idea if that's too much, too little, or just enough to make me more intrigued. And so this is a try before I buy. This is a trade. This is a pick up at retail game for me right now. And I hate saying that because I love this game, right? Speaking of that, it's a perfect segue into the last game we'll cover today, Spirit Island Nature Incarnate. Final thoughts on this one was that I feel like this was a big letdown from Greater Than Games. They had to revamp how they did the stretches or the unreveals, the daily whatevers now on Backer Kit. I hate Backer Kit's way of doing that as a whole, because it's like, you have to do it this way. No rule book, no good gameplay in terms of how necessarily that's going to be the flow. A few old reviews of Spirit Island. We all know Spirit Island is a freaking amazing game. The vast majority of people that turned into this campaign were not interested in the original Spirit Island, so putting reviews out there, that doesn't make as much sense. Pandering to your new people, I'm fine with it, but pander to the crowd that also got you there too, a little bit in this way, right? I mean, it raised literally a hair under $1.2 million. So, I mean, from that side of things, absolutely smashing success. But in terms of showing us and incentivizing me to actually get it now versus waiting to retail, I don't need foil promos. I don't. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I will not buy the other ones, because what you're having now then is the people who are getting the foil promos on this campaign, they're already having foil promos or foil cards for the spirit cards out at retail. And so it's an additional cost there that's not actually adding anything significant from a gameplay standpoint or from this is actually a nice deluxeification. No rule book even. I don't think, unless they added it by the time it ended, right? But I don't know, because I turned off the, updates at the end. It's nice that you're showing me cards. It's nice that you showed me the spirits, but I want to see a rule book of some of these detailed mechanics. And that was just a letdown. I don't really feel the need for some of these premium tokens. Maybe I'll pick it up at some point, but this is like a top 5 game for me of all time, if not top 3. And I have no feeling like with Jagged Earth, you got a good deal. Jagged Earth, again, they went the leader route. They went sort of that aspect of things where you're going to get a better deal than buying at retail later. Like, you're not going to get a whole bunch of exclusives, but you're going to get your value worth from that side of things. And I want to support them. But I saw no incentive for me as the consumer. And occasionally I have to look out for me as the consumer to get it from that standpoint. So, kind of a mixed bag here at the end for a game I love. There you go. Final judgments on things ending soon, just recently ended. Because, the other reason that I'm covering a lot of these games, obviously, is because the majority of these ones who have ended that I covered at the end here, they're going to have late backing. And so it's still worth considering, because you'll see it come out. You'll see the emails. You'll see the prompts. You'll see the Board Game Geek notifications thrown your way, right? So hopefully that helps with your judgment and your decision making. Or if you're one of those people who's $1 backing some of them as well, in order to try and get more information before the campaign manager or the pledge manager closes. So there you go. My thoughts, final judgments, crowdfunding. There you go. Stay classy. See you around. Let me know if you like this segment or not. Just trying something new, because I like talking about board games. I don't do it enough, right?